Ms. Greer, would you please call the roll?
Cochran, Alvin,
Here.
Goodfriend,
Present.
Hoda,
Here.
Klein,
Here.
Lunkins, and Smith.
Here. Thank you. The agenda has been circulated already. Are there any questions relative to the agenda? If not, we can pass by unanimous consent if there are no issues with that. Is there any objection to passing the agenda by unanimous consent? Okay, hearing none, the agenda is hereby passed by unanimous consent, and we will move on to superintendent candidates initial interview, our 6 o'clock, which should be Mr. Kellum.
Mr. Callum. Callum.
Instead of today.
Unfortunately, the book that has the background is not in the weights.
Okay, we got today.
This is too bad.
Okay. Good evening.
Hey, good evening. How are you?
Good.
Good evening.
So we can, are you ready to get started?
I'm ready.
Okay.
I'm ready when you are.
All right, let me say what I need to say here. We'll
Can
get
you
rolling.
give us just a minute so I can pull up the background, please? In the, I need this one. Thank you.
You think you should proceed with his opening remarks while you're doing that? He's trying to talk about.
Well, I think we can take 1 second, okay? Thank you.
You ready? Okay. Good evening. On behalf of Oak Park Schools, I would like to welcome Derek Kellum to this interview for the position of superintendent. Mr. Kellum is currently the school director for U-Prep schools in Detroit, Michigan. I'll take a few minutes to briefly discuss our format. The interview may take up to 70 minutes. There will be 18 questions from the board. Toward the end of the interview, time permitting, we will give you an opportunity to ask questions of the board and to make a closing statement. We'll let you know if time is becoming an issue and if there is a need to pick up the pace of the responses. As the board hears from each candidate and weighs this critical decision, they'll be doing so through the lens of the candidate profile that was developed with considerable input from our stakeholders. Our intent is to identify the candidate that best fits this profile, which board members already have at hand. For those present in our audience, you may submit feedback by way of the form provided for this purpose, either on our website under the superintendent search or using the half sheet paper in the back of the room by using the QR code, taking a picture of it, and then going right to the site where you can leave feedback. Although the task of choosing our next superintendent is the responsibility of the Board of Education as the elected representatives of our community, we value and consider the input of our stakeholders in the process. Mr. Kellum, are you ready to proceed?
I'm ready.
Okay. Mr. Kellum, while we have had the opportunity to review your application materials, our audience members have not had that opportunity. Please briefly review your background and share what causes you to be interested in this position at this point in your career.
All right, thank you. One, I appreciate the opportunity to present myself to the board and to the community of Oak Park. In 1981, my parents made the decision to move us to Oak Park. And mainly the decision was based on I was starting kindergarten. And my mother wanted us to have an opportunity to have a quality education. And we were from Southwest Detroit, right by River Rouge and Ecorse, so that was a long way from home. But she felt like Oak Park gave us an opportunity to have a quality life, and that was a decision that she and my father made. I began my K-12 career at John Dewey Elementary School, and that's where I went to kindergarten and first grade. Dewey closed after my first grade year, and we went over to Einstein. And at Einstein, I had a fifth grade teacher named Miss Wyndham. And Miss Wyndham, she was from the South, and she was a mixture of Southern and Detroit. So you could imagine she was tough, she was stern, she was a disciplinarian, and she instilled in her students that we needed to be twice as strong, twice as fast, twice as smart, and work twice as hard if we were going to be successful in life because she would say that America was not going to hand a bunch of black kids anything. So we had to be just that tough to overcome any obstacles that might come our way. And so I'm appreciative of Ms. Wyndham. And as I sit here today interviewing to be the superintendent in that same district that she worked in, I feel like it's just, it's a special moment. From Einstein, I went on to Roosevelt Middle School, which is OPA. And then I graduated from Oak Park High in 1994. From there, I went on to Wayne State University, where I received a bachelor's degree in secondary English education. I began my teaching career at Pontiac Central High School. At the time, Derek Coleman, who's currently the superintendent in River Rouge, he was my principal. He interviewed me. And Mr. Coleman called me the LeBron James of teaching. And though I'm not a big Bron guy, I understood that was a compliment because I was such a natural at least building relationships and doing what I had to do in the classroom to inspire kids. In Pontiac, I had a good career. I taught English. I was the English department chair. I was the school improvement chair. I was on the accreditation team and led that effort. When Pontiac Central and Pontiac Northern merged together to become Pontiac High School, I was on the committee to bring those two school communities together. I was a department chair at Pontiac High before I was promoted to be the curriculum director for the Pontiac School District, where I worked under Kelly Williams, who is currently still the superintendent in Pontiac. And from there, I was hired into this district, Oak Park, by Dr. Davita Colbert to be an instructional coach and a curriculum specialist, where I worked primarily at the high school at Oak Park High, before eventually being the assistant principal my last year in this district before I was offered the position that I currently serve in as the school director at University Preparatory Academy High School. So I've been there for 5 years. I love UPrep. I love my school. But this was an opportunity that's special to me to serve in Oak Park in this seat. So that's why I'm here today, and that's why I'm here to present myself to the board, because it's important to me that we hire the best person possible. And that if that person is me, then gladly will serve.
Thank you. What specific qualities and capabilities do you bring to this position that may set you apart from the others?
Well, as I just kind of ran down my career, I've always been a curriculum and instruction guy. That's what I specialize in. I'm an English teacher. You have to know content standards. You have to know English curriculum. I was a curriculum director. I was an instructional coach. So I served in those roles. So that in itself put me in an advantageous position to do a good job as a superintendent. But also my time in UPrep has really honed my skills as far as culture and climate. I don't know how familiar you are with UPrep schools, but I will put our culture and climate up against any schools in the country. And so I'm a much better educator today than I was when I left Oak Park, because I always had that curriculum background, but now I really have that culture and climate background, and the two of those things mixed together, and when you add to it having a firm understanding of Oak Park's district and the history and the needs here, I believe that I can bring the opportunity to galvanize the staff and make people feel a sense of calm and familiarity with who's going to be in this position. And so all those things working together in concert, I believe I'm the best candidate.
All right, so I'm going to ask you a couple questions about district relations. Maintaining healthy relationships with the school and community stakeholders is important to the Board of Education. Please share with us how you have gone about building and maintaining successful relationships with all members of the school community.
Well, first and foremost, I believe everybody who has worked with me understand very early on that I'm really passionate about the mission of educating students. And so typically, if we have a working relationship, we probably met doing the work, all right? And I believe that I consistently I'm my authentic self. The person that I am right here with you all, right now, I'm always going to be. I'm passionate about education, and I understand how much it takes for a group of people to work together and collaborate in order to get the job done. So I believe when it comes down to healthy and successful relationships, it really just comes down to being a good person, being honest with folks, being consistent. I believe if we know each other and we see each other day in and day out, you start to get a good understanding of who I am, and I'm good-hearted. You know, I care about people. I believe in honesty and trust are very important to me. Loyalty. And so for those reasons, I believe whether it's staff members, you know, home office administration, the students, or their parents or community partners, I'm just the same person all the time. And I think that bodes for having healthy relationships.
How do we create a district-wide culture of continuous improvement, planning strategically, and aligning our actions to achieve strategic outcomes?
All right, well, first we have to really understand who we are and what we're trying to accomplish. There are a lot of different ways to go about teaching and learning, but you can't be a master of everything. Like, every system has to have an understanding of who are we, what are our variables, and what are we trying to accomplish. And I firmly believe that you have to hone in on the few key elements that you're going to do extremely well, and pour all your energy, pour all your resources, pour all your talent into getting those things accomplished. Me personally, I believe having a culture of high expectations, being a culturally responsive system, and having a system based around student-centered experiences are the three keys. And so everything that we do, we strategically plan around how to be great in those areas. And if you clear about what the mission is and clear about what the vision is, and you clearly articulate and collaborate with all the stakeholders, and you never change, and you're consistent about what we're about, and you trust the research, I believe you build systems that stand the test of time. I always tell my staff that we're not trying to be a lucky school, and we're definitely not trying to be a losing school. We're trying to be a leading school. And what a leading school is a school that has a high understanding of its antecedents, like what do we put in to get our outputs. So you have to know what it is that we do that work well so you can replicate it. You also need to know what it is that we do that does not work so we can stop doing it. And so when you just like really stick to those principles and you're a true professional learning community, I think success is inevitable.
All right, thank you.
I have two questions for you. The first is about political awareness. As our superintendent, how would you advocate for political action that benefits our district and public education throughout our state?
Well, first, you know, I'm an educator. I'm not a politician by any means, but I do recognize that there's an important role that political elements play in making sure an organization reaches its goals. So I know enough about just how organizations need to succeed, and schools in particular, that I am very, you know, I'm a researcher. I'm very in tune with my leadership style, and one of my Clifton strengths is I'm a learner. And so I research and I take in information and I try to get as many facts about whatever circumstances that we're in as possible. I'm also, my number one strength is I'm a maximizer, which means that I value talented people, right? I don't know how many people in here have a sports background, but I liken myself to a point guard. I like to have talented folks around me, and I'm not intimidated or embarrassed about being around other folks who are really good at what they do. So in regards to having that political leverage, I think it's important to have people around you who are really savvy around how to be successful in that realm, and to trust and empower and to support them to help us help ourselves. So, even the working relationship with the board, if someone on the board has like political connections and understand how the system works really well, I will build those relationships with them. I always will have people on my leadership team who have a passion and understanding about politics, and then I'll do my best to stay abreast of the facts and to put people in position to succeed. And when it's time to build consensus and present to our community what we're trying to accomplish, I'll be very prepared and very ready to deliver the message.
My second question is more about challenges. Superintendents are often faced with challenges of making decisions where there is no clear right answer, and members of the community are split on the right path forward. Please talk about a time when you were faced with a difficult decision where you knew there would be a group of people unhappy with your decision, whichever way you decided. Specifically, how did you go about making that decision and getting people on board with the direction that you determined was best?
I believe a difficult decision that I made relatively recently was at UPA High School. Coming into this year, we got rid of our uniform policy. And, UPA High School, like everything was UPrep, right? And we red, black, and white, and, it was a lot of school spirit and identity attached to the clothing that students wore. And, but we had a firm belief that in order to be the best school that we can be, we need to empower students to be who they are and not try to, control them or give them all type of tight mandates over what they should and could wear. But a lot of our parents identified our uniform as being what made us a good school, right? When people saw UPrep kids in a collared shirt, they equated that to, well, that's why I came, because you all were a certain way. And so when the decision was made and I had to talk the community through, here's why we're going away from the uniform policy, it was just a matter of delivering the research and the rationale behind it, being very transparent about why and what we were trying to accomplish, and really relying on the relationship, the trust that we had built over the years, that there had never been a decision made that proved to be detrimental to our students, and that this one was the right one moving forward.
Thank you.
Mr. Kelly, let's discuss leadership attributes. What is the most difficult decision you have had to deal with in your educational career, and how was it resolved?
Well, one difficult decision that I made this year that was very difficult under the circumstances. Mind you that last year we were virtual throughout the year, so this was the first year coming back on campus. And so a lot was at stake. We're in the middle of a pandemic. There was a lot of safety and health issues. We all know what we've been through. And on the second day of school, my Algebra 2 teacher resigned. And there was no replacing this position. She teaches 11th grade math. Not only that, she teaches the honors. All my strongest math students in the 11th grade was in this class, and the other teacher was day one brand new. And so the decision that I made, because I stayed up for nights wondering what to do because I didn't want my parents to freak out, but I decided that our best bet was for me to teach the class. And as I said at the beginning, I'm an English teacher. So it was a intimidating decision. But what I did was I scheduled out one of the classes to create, because we're on blocks, 2 classes each day. So there was a block of time in the middle of each day where I can continue to run the school and also teach the math class. It was a difficult decision because my supervisors weren't too thrilled, because they felt like, hey, we pay you to be the leader of the school, not to teach math. But I really believe that in order for our school year to be successful, that I couldn't afford for those 11th graders to be put in that position. I ended up teaching math the whole month of October and November, while at the same time being a school director. I had to do a lot of work at nights, and there were some consequences for it, but all in all, my students were happy, my parents were happy, and I don't believe we would have gotten through this school year the way we've had I not made that decision.
Thank you. Next question. Excuse me. Next question. How do you lead without having official authority over the people involved? And have you been in that situation before in your career? And if so, how did you handle it?
Well, first, I believe, and I firmly believe, that every single person, especially in the school community, is a leader, right? If we're going to be a great school, a great system, we all are leaders. So the position itself shouldn't be what empowers one to lead. If I think about an instance I had, I do remember when we first, to go back to Pontiac, when we first merged Central and Northern, like we were bringing two school systems together, two teaching staffs, and the first couple of days, there was no designated leaders, but you had folks from both buildings, and we had a brand new principal. We had a day one principal that no one knew. And so when it was time to gather the departments together, there was no department chair identified. But in order for us to have some order and to get the school year off to a start, people just had to take leadership roles. So I do remember bringing the English department together and presenting them with like the PD agenda and everything. And I made it very clear, I'm not the department chair. And when it's time to apply, we all can go for it. But right now, for the sake of order, we need to work together and get things moving forward. And so that is an example that will be applicable to the question.
Last question.
Yes, sir.
What are the key elements needed to establish and maintain a good working relationship between you and our board?
Oh, yeah. So with the board, I believe that it's important that we communicate early and often. We build trust with one another. I believe we have to be our genuine selves and talk real about the challenges that we face, and be able to be vulnerable, because there's going to be a lot of times where I don't know or you don't know, we're not really sure what the right answer is. But I believe a strong team has to have the ability to be uncertain together. And that's when you have your best thoughts, your best creativity. That's when you really start to find out, are you truly a successful team? Like, can we continue to work together? So I've been, I understand the board relationship as far as, I've worked in central office, I've been a principal, and I understand how important it is because the school board supports the district and offers like guidelines, and so I would just like do my best to maintain consistent communication, to be honest, to make sure that you're abreast of things early and not being caught off guard about what's going on or what challenges we may face. Having regular scheduled meetings, even if they're informal, even if it's a phone call, or get on video conference, but regularly communicate with one another and be on the same page. And I'm big about this when it comes to team building. Once we build consensus, let's all work hard to make it work, to make sure that we're successful. There's always going to be some disagreement along that journey. But once we all say, hey, here's the approach, everybody put their best foot forward to ensure success.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Keller. I'm going to be asking questions in regard to the instruction and curriculum. What experience and successes have you had with closing the achievement gap for economically disadvantaged and minority students?
Yes, well, my entire career has been with economically disadvantaged and minority students. One thing about the achievement gap, I really consider it an equity gap, because when you really look at the research oftentimes that gap is because students aren't offered the opportunity to be on grade level. So the main thing that we do to attack that gap is to ensure that we're offering an equitable education. And by equity, I mean teaching to the standards. There are standards at every grade level of what is expected to be taught. You have English standards, math, science, social studies, even in your elective classes, there are standards. And so by training teachers how to take that standard, unpack it, and really understand the skills within the standard, and develop their learning targets according to the standards, and then develop their lesson around what the learning target is, and have your exit ticket on the other end, so that's your evidence of success. If you have that alignment, that through line between standard, learning target, activity, assessment, then you almost can't not offer students an equitable education. Now here's the challenge. The kids in front of you may have all type of different ability levels or experiences or understanding of the content, and it can be very tempting to lower the standard to appease your students. And so we have to train teachers how to scaffold up, not lower. All right, because it's necessary to scaffold. Some kids are going to need a bridge to get to the standard. And so how do you take 25 kids in front of you and come up with a lesson that accounts for each one of them? That's the work of teaching and learning. That's what we work so hard to do, and you really never master it. But, you know, I know the teachers in this district. There's some very talented teachers in Oak Park. And so when we all working together around the fundamentals of teaching and learning, and it all come down to the instructional core, student, teacher, and content. And that teacher's repertoire to use all the tools at his or her disposal to ensure that those students meet that standard. So doing that work, developing teachers, building capacity, that's how we attack that. Again, I consider it an opportunity gap, because so often, if you look at the research, students are very rarely even offered grade level materials. And a lot of times the kids do whatever we ask them to do. It's just we're not asking them to do the right things. And so we have to know what is the standard, and we have to be steadfast in making sure that we're not lowering it, even when it hurts, even when it's difficult, even when it's challenging. And that's how you attack the achievement gap.
The next question is, what is the biggest risk you have taken to do what's right for children?
So, the biggest risk, and it's been like, this is new, truly being a culturally responsive system. All right, the school that I'm at now, the network I'm in now, we have really decided to be committed to being culturally responsive. And honestly, as I'm thinking about it in a moment, this is the most risky thing, because I'm sitting here interviewing to be a superintendent, and I'm about to tell us how important it is to be culturally responsive. So some people think being culturally responsive is putting a picture of King on the wall, or Malcolm X, or if you're really being radical, the Black Panthers. But that's not necessarily being culturally responsive. Some people think it's putting Maya Angelou or Bell Hooks in the curriculum. That's not necessarily being culturally responsive either. Some people think it's, hey, let's celebrate multicultures and have diversity and celebrate other people's culture and be tolerant. All those things might be evident that you are culturally responsive, but that in itself is not culturally responsiveness, right? That's multiculturalism. Teaching kids to advocate for themselves and protest, that's social justice. But being culturally responsive requires brain research. And it's not me, this is Zaretta Hammond's research. And so, here's the example I will give. Every single person in this room has a brain. We can liken our brain to a hard drive of a computer. Your culture is the software that goes into the computer. So let me help you all even further. So if I say this weekend I'm going to have a family gathering, everybody in here can process what that means. Our brain knows what a family is and what a gathering is. But it's our culture that's going to tell us what it sounds like, what it feels like, what it smells like, what it tastes like, what it truly is to have a family gathering. Now, my understanding of a family gathering and Vice President's understanding of a family gathering may be two totally different things, what they look and feel like. But one is not better than the other. It's just we learn through our culture. We receive the world through our culture. We experience through our culture. So to be culturally responsive, we have to have that firm understanding that our students bring culture into the schoolhouse every single day. They bring it into the classroom every single day. And until we understand that culture and we look at it as an asset, not a deficit, and we stop trying to replicate other people's culture in the classroom, we're not going to be culturally responsive. We can't be Birmingham, we can't be Rochester, we can't be Ann Arbor, we can't be Southfield. We have to be Oak Park. And if we're truly culturally responsive, we understand that the talents and the skills that our kids bring to us can be leveraged. And our teachers are talented enough that if they do the research and understand what culturally responsive education truly is, that they can deliver instruction in a way where the kids can process it the same way we understand what a family gathering is. It can be different, but we both can have a firm understanding of the essentials. And so that's what I mean by we have to be truly culturally responsive. We have to double down on being Oak Park. We can't be anything else. And once we do that, the kids will realize that I'm valued here. But as long as kids think they have to leave their culture at the door to fit in, we're not going to get to that level of being a leading district that we desire. And so my risk is for the rest of my career, I'm going to be culturally responsive wherever I'm at. And so right now, I'm being risky.
Okay, this is where I get all brain messed up. Okay, so the last question is, how would you meet the needs of college readiness while also providing high-quality, relevant, career-focused opportunities for students?
All right, so college readiness, college and career. All right, all right, so to go back real quick with culturally responsive, the ultimate goal is to develop independent learners. All right, so that way, when they leave out, they're independent. And whatever it is that they do next, they're prepared to do on their own. K-12, we do a lot, right? We pay folks to make sure the kids succeed. But once they leave out of high school, it even get to the point where they're paying somebody else to be educated, right? So when we're talking about college and career, I always talk to parents about, I want students to have options when they leave. I want them to have opportunities. So it is our job to educate them thoroughly where they have all the essential skills and beyond. So when they get to 12th grade, they have opportunities. And so if we develop great relationships with our students, we'll know them well enough to know, well, what do you really want out of life? Because success means different things to different people. So everybody can agree that we want students to be successful in life. But what's success to me and what's success to the next person could be different. But if we do a great job of getting to know our students early on and know what their families want for them and know what they're interested in, then we'll have a better understanding of what is the outcome. Are you going to a 4-year college? Are you going to a 2-year college? Are you going to pursue a trade? Are you going to the military? Are you going to be in the police academy? Whatever those avenues are, if it's where your passion lies, it's the right answer. So as a school system, we need to expose students to a lot of different possibilities and try to give them an opportunity to learn and explore while they're young. So by the time they get to high school, they can start to see a clear path of what they want to do once they leave. I believe as a community, we often play it by ear way too long, right? Like we're 20 years old and we're like, I guess I do want to go to school now, right? Whereas we need to allow kids exposure early on so they can start to see for themselves what they really want to do. And so that's where, whether it's college readiness or career readiness, the beauty of it is to be career ready and to be college ready today is very similar skills. You have to be highly literate. you have to be a critical thinker, you have to be a problem solver. And so our education, the standards that we teach is designed to equip students to get all of those things accomplished. And then it's a matter of having partnerships so that they can go in a direction that fits their interests and need.
Thank you very much.
Welcome, Mr. Kellum.
Hi.
We're going to talk about some finances. Would you please describe your experience with budget development and financial management? What is the largest budget you have built and maintained?
Right. So again, I have a background as being a curriculum director in Pontiac, and so I was over the curriculum budget. It wasn't that big of a budget, probably about $100,000. But that was like really my first experience of getting a budget, going over it with the finance department, learning how to truly like itemize what's essential based on what we spent historically, and knowing like how to allocate these resources to meet the goals of our plan. I'm also a school director currently, and every year I have a budget that I go over with our home office, and that budget is somewhere around, a little under $200,000. And so again, it's like very set in stone. Here's the money that's allocated for each particular aspect of what it takes to run the school successfully. And so, of course, I've never been a superintendent, so I've never had to manage a district budget. But I do understand the principles of budget management and how important it is to be, one, transparent, and to spend time with your finance department to understand the workings of the budget, how money has been spent historically, what is absolutely a set cost that's not going to be maneuvered, like our staff, like what you have to pay your staff, the benefits, all those things are etched in stone, right? And then from there, each school, like what it takes for them to, and so from that standpoint, being the school director, I understand each school's budget, right? I've been a principal for years now. And so being at the district level, it's a matter of looking at the district as a whole and where the funding comes from and how it aligns to our strategic plan, and then how it is allotted to each individual school, and then having those conversations, the constant monitoring and checks and balances built into our system, where it's not like, any one individual who's over a budget, you just have free reign to do whatever. You have to meet frequently about it. You need to have someone constantly monitoring as the superintendent. I have to be abreast of where the spending is and having those conversations with all of those who are responsible for a budget.
How would you ensure we maintain a balanced budget that aligns our spending with our priorities?
Yeah, so first is by being very knowledgeable of the plan itself, like knowing exactly what we're trying to accomplish and what's allotted to, like for example, transportation, the technology that we use in the district. Having an understanding of how the district runs and how we spend money in each of these areas is important. Given that I'm inexperienced, it would require spending a lot of time early on with the finance department and really, understanding how the district has historically budgeted its money and spent the money, and how we need to work together to ensure that those things, stay consistent. I believe is also working with the board and making sure that we're all, it's not one set of eyes on the budget. It's, a collaborative, like the key members understanding what are we trying to spend, how are we using the budgeted money, and how do we check, what systems are in place to ensure that we have checks and balances on spending.
You have one more, number 15.
What opportunities do you believe budget limitations present? In tough financial times, what are your top 3 priorities?
All right, so say the first part of that question again for me, please.
Oh, sure. What opportunities do you believe budget limitations present?
All right, so one, when you have budget limitation, it really pushes you to prioritize, like really to hone in on what's the most important things. What do we absolutely need to have in order to be a viable district? So there's an opportunity to be very creative. Like for example, and I believe, I'm a firm believer in being our own PD. Like sometimes you have extra things that are luxuries. But if you have very talented people in the system, it's about building capacities in the system so that we don't have to go out and outsource for certain things that we have the talent and ability to do from within. So the top 3 priorities, it always starts with teaching and learning. You need to ensure that the classroom teachers have everything that they need to be successful with their students. You need to make sure that you can pay your staff, these hard-working folks who come and commit their lives for children. So I'm a firm believer that educators need to be, paid as well as we can and treated like professionals and work in safe and secure environments and have all the resources that necessary to provide a quality educational experience. I said earlier that student-centered experiences are important as well. So you need to make sure that you have extracurriculars and things for students to be engaged in to keep them excited about coming to school. So we have to make sure that we don't strip away all the things that make school fun for students and make, some kids only come to school originally because of the things that they enjoy doing, and then from there they can develop a thirst for learning. So that's important as well. The third priority, and I'm not sure if I'm putting them in order, but the safety, the health and safety, especially in this climate, we need to make sure that the schools are safe and that we're following all the health codes. And so those 3 things, regardless of what's going on, we have to make sure that we're not just offering them, but we're offering them sufficiently.
Thank you.
Hey, how are you?
How are you?
We're gonna talk about staff and personnel, okay? How would you interact with other administrators in our district? How would you strike to balance between giving them the support and autonomy they need to lead effectively while holding them accountable as to appropriate and necessary?
Yes. So first, you have very clear leadership structures. I'm a firm believer in shared leadership. It's important that people feel empowered to do the job that they're tasked with doing. So there are set meetings with each leadership group. So in the superintendency, the cabinet members, like you have tactical and strategic meetings, and you also have status meetings routinely. The tactical meetings and the strategic meeting, that's where you're getting together and you're developing a plan. And you're making sure that you have a firm understanding of how we're executing what it is that is outlined in our strategic plan. And then status meeting is when you're doing frequent updates and check-ins, how things are going. All right, so that needs to happen at every level. So each building, like a building principal, should be meeting with their leadership team at least once or twice a week, going over the strategy and tactic and having status meetings. As a superintendent, I'm a collaborative, collaboration is key to me. So you have the elementary levels. So you definitely want to, at least on a monthly basis, come together with your elementary principals and really talk through like what supports they needed. They need where are we in regards to pursuing our goals, and just really planning together, right? Like it's important for the principals themselves to have a voice in what the plan is, because home office needs to support the schools, right? So home office absolutely set the plan, like the blueprint, right? Like there's a notion of things are tight and things are loose. So home office, the central office level should set, here's what's tight. For example, I said it earlier, every school need to be a culture of high expectations. Every school need to be culturally responsive. Every school need to offer student-centered experiences. That's tight. There's no negotiating. So I don't care if you go to Pepper, Einstein, Key, OPA, or Oak Park, I see evidence of those three things standing in place. But what's loose is the principal at Pepper can consider his dynamics and decide, well, what does student-centered experiences look like here? The principal at Einstein can do the same. She can look at it and say, what does it look like here? Same with Key and all the schools. So by being clear on what our overall plan is and what's tight, and then where you have the autonomy to work within those structures, that's where you're entrusting and empowering the leaders that you put in place to be great. And so being the superintendent is about meeting frequently, having those conversations. When in doubt, let's talk about it. Don't take unnecessary risks, because we're a team and it's not necessary to take risks when we all can talk about it and come to a consensus. And then when we're not meeting the set plan, because we set goals, every single school should go into a school year with at least 3 to 4 very clear, concise goals of what it's trying to accomplish, and that should align to the district plan. All right, so if we have a clear goal coming into the school year and all of a sudden we're getting off track, one, we should meet frequently enough where we're not so far off track that it's devastating. All right, so that's why we require frequent meetings. But two, the plan itself is the guide. So when it comes down to holding people accountable, it's not a surprise, because we all know what we're gunning for from the beginning, and we all know what the measures are and what the measures of success are. And so if you're running things well, the person himself can recognize when they're not meeting the standard and start to make course corrections early in the process before it's something that would be detrimental to a school. So that's how I would manage the whole thing.
My next question is, please describe your most successful experience in a building and high-performing work team.
I would say, like right now, my experiences right now, currently the school that I'm the school director of, we have a 98% graduation rate. Our students pass their classes at a 95+% rate at each grade level. And that has happened from learning that we have to frequently look at the data. Like, I've learned over the course of my career, you don't wait till the report cards come out to find out that students failed classes. 2 weeks into the quarter, you pull the grade data, and you have those conversations with your teaching staff, and y'all go through data cycles, and you start to ask the question, why are the students not achieving? What can we do right now to change our outcomes? So by the time the report card get here in week 9 or 10, we've already done the hard work. We've already dug into the problems. We've already had time to fix it. So being a successful team is understanding that there are going to be very critical conversations. It's going to be difficult. You're going to have moments where you don't feel great about the results that we're getting. But if we're willing to, if we have measures and we're willing to stick to our measures and be disciplined about what the work needs to be, then we're going to be successful. So to me, a good team is not a team that necessarily go out and party and have fun together. It's a team that's committed to the vision and stay dedicated to the work and can trust that each individual is going to do his or her part to hold up their end of the bargain. And that when it's time to come together, we come together and we are very transparent and clear about what the work needs to be. And then we incorporate all the necessary stakeholders. And so, you know, I consider myself work on a very successful team at the present, and I know how to replicate that success because it's not happening by chance.
And my last question is, how would you assess and enhance the culture and climate of our district?
Yes, and that's key. I'm telling you all right now that the culture and the climate is what we have to really lean into, because culture and climate will eat academics for lunch if it's not right. So you can pour into the academics all you want, but if your culture and climate is not strong, you're going to run into problems, right? And so again, I'm an Oak Parker. I understand Oak Park pretty well. The pandemic impacted everybody. No one was ready for it. But I can argue that in some ways, Oak Park was more vulnerable, and I'm thinking specifically about the high school, because when people think about a district, they're not necessarily thinking about the elementary levels. We envision elementary school as a bunch of little kids coming to a bunch of caring folks. They're learning the fundamentals, they're happy, they're having a good time. People perceive a district based on the high school because it's when the teenagers are involved that everybody has these misconceptions and these notions, right? But we understand that the high school is the flagship. It is what people probably identify with first, the good or the bad. And so when I say the culture and the climate and how we were vulnerable, you know, there was a superintendent change recently, and then the pandemic happened. And anytime you have changes like that, your culture is in a vulnerable state. And then in March of 2020, all of a sudden you stop school and send all the kids home to their various neighborhoods that they live in. That was going to be difficult, right? And so I believe right now there's an opportunity to reestablish who we are. First, we have to know what is the Oak Park culture. What are we striving for? And we have to, I believe it may be necessary for some restructuring in the way we use our talent and resources. Like, it makes sense to have a culture, an administrator that their job is to ensure that the culture and climate is what we want it to be. Because there's a lot to try to manage all these different things and at the same time, as an afterthought, make sure that you're abreast of the culture. And so one is by knowing what a good culture looks and feel like, and we all being on the same page of what we envision the school to look like. And then two, positioning our people to be impactful in that way, to make sure that, you know, you have the talent and the people who are willing to invest in the relationship with the student. I said it earlier, we have to be culturally responsive and show the students that they're valued and that we believe in them and that they're geniuses and that they're beautiful. All these different things play into the culture. And it's okay for them to be their authentic self, right? Because here's the thing, and I'll wrap this up here. Teenagers are always going to make adults nervous, right? When rock and roll came out, the adults were nervous. When rap started to get popular, the adults were nervous. That's always going to change. What they wear is going to make adults nervous. But if you truly understand the young folks that you serve and you build those relationships, you understand when to put the alert button on and when it's just teenagers being teenagers. I can look at 100 teenagers walk past me and I can know which one might be problematic. If you don't have a trained eye, you might think the whole group is, but it's not that case, right? And so I know that recently we had an issue and it caused a stir But to me, a lot of those things could have been avoided through relationship building and good communication and really knowing how to instill certain values in the students. And so that's what I mean by building culture and climate. Like, what are our values? What do we stand on? What do we believe in? And be steadfast about implementing it.
Thank you.
Thank you. We would like to take a few minutes now to provide you with an opportunity to ask any questions you might have for the board, if you have any.
I guess one question I would have is like about our enrollment projections. Are there any like concerns in that regards going into next year?
Yes.
And then I guess the other one is just like.
Do we have someone
Oh,
else?
I'm sorry.
I would just add that I think, Mr. Cohen, you being familiar with the district, you know how difficult it can be any year to do enrollment, to predict what enrollment in a school district like ours that is so, that such a large part of our enrollment comes from schools of choice. And I think coming out of the pandemic, there's a lot of theories out there, right? So there's one theory of there are a bunch of kids who've been staying home these last 2 years and haven't been going to school, and when things calm down next year, they're all going to be coming back in. There are other theories around, that say that the downward trend is going to pick up, and that's something we have to look out for. What we know is that starting next year, we're going to have an early childhood center at Lessinger. That's specifically built around increasing enrollment and engagement with students who will stay here long term. If we look beyond that, we have Northland being developed with 1,500 housing units. So that could impact enrollment. So I think there's a lot of mixed indicators, and it's very hard to reliably know which one it is. So is there concern? Yes, because I don't think we can ever know what our enrollment's going to look like.
I guess my second question and my last question would just be like the general conditions of the buildings. Like, is there a concern about the conditions of the buildings at all?
We just passed a 54, and then I think it's up now to 55 based on interest rate bond, $1 million bond. And the infrastructure throughout the district is being upgraded substantially. Some of it is still in territory that we would really rather not be in, but over the next several years, it's all going to be upgraded to at least acceptable levels. Well, what I mean by that is all the stuff that's not acceptable is going to be replaced with brand new. Additionally, we do have the brand new Lessinger Early Childhood Center and some other projects that are going on. So right now, it's a work in progress, but the future in terms of our building, anybody else is free to disagree, but I think the future is actually pretty good in our district in that regard.
I would like to say, Mr. Cullen, that because you are a former Oak Parker, okay, you have a better view and vision and knowledge of the buildings themselves. So we've aged. Some of us have been aged gently. Others have had a harder time. Our oldest building is just across the parking lot here, our original building. But it's in decent condition. Our roofs were done about 10 years ago when we had the bond issue then. There has to be maintenance and there has to be repairs, wear and tear. But all in all, yes, we have Lessinger, and you're well aware of Lessinger as an elementary school is going into a different phase. Should be exciting and open for young people to want to be here. My expectations are to challenge our students and teach up, not down. And that's what I would like to see happen for our young people that live in the district. We don't have a population of district residents that come to us to be able to work on that and work with our community, our taxpayers, to encourage them and show them the proof in the pudding is what we can do for our children,
Yes, ma'am.
to bring them back.
Trustee Horton. So I think that question of being attentive to the condition of our buildings has been a very big focus over the last 3 years. So before the pandemic, before the bond, there was investment in replacing the playgrounds, in putting in new media centers. With the bond money and then with COVID money as well, we've been able to replace HVAC system, to start replacing HVAC systems. And the bond money certainly will not meet the needs that we have. We have buildings that were built in the 1960s for the most part with money from revenue from Northland Mall, which no longer exists. But that has been a very big focus over the last few years is realizing that the physical condition of our buildings very much impacts not only actual student safety, but a sense of safety in the building, which feeds into the culture and climate. And so that's been something that's been focused on, and we've been leveraging what we can to do that, leveraging food service money to do renovations in the food service areas in various buildings. And again, as we look out on the horizon, with Northland coming back online, with the FedEx facility that was built on Greenfield, with the property at 8 Mile and Greenfield that's being developed now, that's going to impact both our bond revenues and our non-homestead revenues and sinking fund revenues positively. So the outlook is we should be in a better position to address those as we go forward, but there's also things that can't wait until then. So those are the things we're trying to address now with the bond, COVID money, and even before that with some of the fund balance that we've had and that we began spending 3 years ago.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
We have a little time remaining. Is there anything you would like to add?
No, I would just like to thank you all for the opportunity. Again, I have great respect for you all, and I know that we all are very passionate about wanting the best for the future of the school district. I appreciate those who decide to be audience members and be here. And I just want to say this, I recognize like at this particular level, in this particular position of superintendent, I don't have prior experience. I will say again, one of my leadership styles is I'm a learner. And throughout my career, I have been successful at every phase, and every single time, at one point, I was day one and inexperienced. So it's not the first time that I will have to learn some things to be really good at the job. But I do believe that my strengths will carry me through those learning phases, and then if we're working together, that we can absolutely be successful. I also would like to say that Oak Park is a destination for me. It's a destination job. I don't desire to be somewhere else. It's not a career stepping stone. Honestly, I never really considered being a superintendent, and it's only because it's Oak Park that I even started to prey on it. And so we all understand that it's going to be a long-term investment, and I'm in it for the long haul if I'm selected. And I really, it would be personal to me to help us move forward. And I will work and do my part to make sure that all the stakeholders feel respected and feel comfortable and feel as though that we're doing the right things for our district and for our community. And so with that, I appreciate the opportunity. I can assure you that if offered the opportunity, that I would work my tail off to do the best job I can, and you would never regret hiring me.
Well, Mr. Cullen, we appreciate your interest in the superintendent position for Oak Park Schools. The board is interviewing 7 candidates this week. We will let you know Thursday evening where you stand in our search process. Thank you for your participation in our first round interview.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
I do have some materials. Can I pass them out?
We got to process, there's some yellow cards in the back. Some yellow cards in the back basket. Fill those out. And, okay, yeah, that'll be
Yeah,
during
during
the
public comment.
Public comment.
Thank you
Okay.
very much.
Okay. Speaking of,
I remember.
Appreciate it.
oh, sorry.
I like what I heard. Yes. Oh, don't worry about it.
I see you got something over here. Went to school with that.
Wait a minute. Mr. President, I'm gonna have to step out.
Me?
No, not to.
Oh, yeah,
speak,
go
just,
for it. Go for it.
We have a few minutes before the next meeting.
Yeah.
Great, anybody wants another drink? Bag of chips.
Depending on what you bring to drink.
like Mr. Kellum and myself, we have gatherings every year to bring all the alumni. I'm the president. I made myself president. It's not a title that was given to me, but on Facebook, I run all the alumni pages. We have a Christmas and a picnic every year. We bring all the alumni, no matter what year you graduated. And speaking on Mr. Kellum's behalf, I've known this gentleman for 28 years. Great human. Even though he's working for Detroit right now, he still, every day, anything Oak Park does, he posts and brings attention to how great Oak Park is, the track, the football team, any athlete that gets a scholarship. That's the kind of gentleman that he is. And to myself, I do the same thing. But he goes above and beyond. So any person that fits for this position is Mr. Kellum, in my opinion. I'm 30 years plus alumni now. And, I run the whole show with every alumni. We all have to do all the things. And everybody speaks highly of this gentleman because he brings more to the table than, because he's been in there. He worked at Oak Park. We left, we moved on, I live in Troy and all that. But this gentleman still brings it to everybody, makes aware how great Oak Park is. And I just bring up the parties and the picnics to make everybody come together. And he brings the shine of how great the individuals are at Oak Park. I just bring everybody together to meet everybody, to make sure we stay connected. We are family. Oak Park is #1 in Michigan. I guarantee you that. When we get together, we're family. No matter, I haven't seen some people 24 years, but when we get to that Christmas party at Mr. Joe's, you guys are all invited, by the way. It's every year, last Saturday before Christmas. We become as a family. Doesn't matter how long the years we see, but he goes above and beyond of shining Oak Park on Facebook and anywhere he goes. And because of him, I know how great the track team is, how many years they won, the football, who gets a scholarship. Even though he works for a different district, he still brings that to light. So I just want to say, if there's any candidate who would be perfect for this position, is Mr. Kellum, besides me. So thank you so much for your time. I appreciate for all you guys, what you guys do. Oak Park for life, #1. And please do come to the next party. Drinks on me. All right? Thank you, guys.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Ready. Jim, we ready?
Why you guys stay up here?
Okay.
Been left out of here. He said he was stone cold.
Ready to go?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Good evening. On behalf of Oak Park Schools, I would like to welcome Sean Shackelford to this interview for the position of superintendent. Mr. Shackelford is currently the Executive Director of Student Services and Diversity for the Port Huron Area School District in Port Huron, Michigan. I'll take a few minutes to briefly describe our format. The interview may take up to 70 minutes. There will be 18 questions from the board. Toward the end of the interview, time permitting, we will give you an opportunity to ask questions of the board and to make a closing statement. We will let you know if time is becoming an issue and if there is a need to pick up the pace of the responses. As the board hears from each candidate and weighs this critical decision, they will be doing so through the lens of the candidate profile that was developed with considerable input from our stakeholders. Our intent is to identify the candidate that best fits this profile, which the board members have at hand. For those present in and our audience, you may submit feedback by way of the form provided for this purpose, either on our website under the superintendent search portion, or using the half sheet of paper in the back with the QR code and your phone's camera function. Although the task of choosing our next superintendent is a responsibility of the Board of Education as the elected representatives of the community, we value and consider the input of our stakeholders in the process. Ms. Shackelford, while we have had the opportunity to review your application materials, the audience members have not. Please briefly review your background and share what causes you to be interested in this position at this point in your career.
Thank you. Thank you all for having me here this evening. So I am a native of Mount Clemens, Michigan. I'm a proud Mount Clemens bather and grew up. My brother and I went through Mount Clemens schools, graduated, and then found my way to the University of Michigan, where, as I found in my career, I've had a series of fortunate experiences where I've interacted with people who helped direct and shape my career. I was a little unsure as I got closer to graduation in terms of what I wanted to do. I had taken a lot of courses in English, didn't quite know what I wanted to do with that. I ran across a counselor, or I shouldn't say a counselor, he's now the assistant dean of the School of Ed of University of Michigan, and he and I hit it off, and he really directed me to go into teaching, which I resisted. I had two aunts who were teachers. I was not very interested in teaching, but he encouraged me to go into it and told me that there would be a need for a person like me, especially who taught teaching English. And so I gave it a shot, and so I started my career in 1995 in Detroit Public Schools as an English teacher. I taught there for about 2 years, and then I moved over right next door to Southfield Public Schools, where I was employed there for 11 years. I was a teacher, English teacher at the middle school level, the high school level. I was promoted to assistant principal, and then I was also promoted to principal, Leonard Elementary. After 2 years, the superintendent tapped me and said, "Hey, we started closing Leonard, and we want to transition that building, or Bernie Middle School, into a K-8, and we want you to come over and help with that transition." So I moved over to Bernie, and we transitioned that building over to not only a K-8, but also we began the University Middle School that same year. And so after that, as we transitioned, I reconnected with my now wife, who was living in Florida. And so I had a choice to make. And so the choice was, I never lived out of state before, so I decided to move down to Florida, down to Jacksonville, Florida, where I was a principal there at the high school level and at the middle school level as well. And it was a great experience. And again, one of my mentors, still one of my mentors today, was my supervisor at the time. He's a great man, and I learned a lot from him. It was again, a very humbling and great experience to, as I always tell people, on Monday I was a principal. On Friday I went down to Jacksonville. I was a vice principal. And it was a great experience because I learned a lot about how to take a step back and how to learn different cultures, because it was quite a difference from Southfield to Jacksonville, Florida. And so I did that for a couple years, and then I had another life experience. My wife gave birth to our first daughter, and I took it upon myself, and we made the decision that I would be a stay-at-home dad for 2 years. And that is an experience that I to this day, is one of my greatest experiences. I don't regret it for anything in the world. I had an opportunity, my wife and I were in a position, we had an opportunity to be with my daughter for the first 2 years of her life. And I'm gonna tell you, it has made me a better man, and ultimately has made me a better educator. But after 2 years, I felt the itch and I need to get back into the building. And so I was recruited because I did a lot of turnaround work in Jacksonville. So I was recruited to come up to Boston and take on one of the toughest schools in the Commonwealth, and right in the heart of Boston. And so I did that for a couple years. And then my wife actually got pregnant right before I came to Boston, and we had twins. And that was not I obviously wasn't expected. And so after, we were okay with thinking about having two, but now we had three. And we weren't really keen on the whole idea of raising three little girls in a big city. And so we made our way back home. And so that's how I ended up in Port Huron. I've been there for the past 5 years. Great experience as a principal, phenomenal experience as a central office administrator. And so what brings me here today is, once again, my life has brought me to the point in my career where I know and I feel that I'm ready to lead at this level. I've had a lot of, like as I talked about, varied experiences, and that it has brought me to this point where when I look at Oak Park, again, having worked in this area, when I saw this position come available, I jumped at the chance. Because as I looked at your district, looked at your looked at how you guys conduct yourselves as a board, looked at what you are, looked at your strategic plan, I felt like this was the right opportunity for me. So I feel like it's very beneficial, not only for me, but also to Oak Park School District as well.
What specific qualities and capabilities do you bring to this position that may set you apart from the others?
So again, I have varied experiences in different districts outside of the state of Michigan, and at all different levels, at the elementary level, middle school level, high school level, and now central administration. Also, I am a very confident leader. I don't shy away from challenges. As I spoke about earlier, I took on one of the toughest schools in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, where this particular school was on the mayor's platform. And I sat in the mayor's office. So talk about pressure when you weren't expecting it. And so pressure does not move me, does not faze me. I thrive off the pressure, but I also thrive off of working with children and doing what's best for children. As I mentioned before, I have 3 girls, and so I know what I want as a parent. And so I bring that same passion when I go to work every single day. Tell a quick story. Our building is connected to an early childhood center, and I usually kind of cut through there because I love to see the kids and love to hear them. Well, I have a young lady. I think she's about 4 years old, and she sees me every day in the suit, and it's like she's attached to me every single day. And so she will not leave until she sees me every day. And so it's kind of a distraction at this point, but again, for me, that's what my work is about. When I can go in and touch kids like that, because she wants to see me and she wants me to give her that attention. And it's like that when I go into every building, because people want to see and kids want to see someone that looks like them, someone that cares about them. And so that's what I bring to, what I would bring to this position, that drive, that passion, because I know I want it for my own kids, and I'm going to work exceptionally hard to make sure that other kids get it as well.
So I'm going to ask you a couple questions about district relations.
Yes.
Maintaining healthy relationships with school and community stakeholders is important to the Board of Education. Please share with us how you have gone about building and maintaining successful relationships with all members of the school community.
It's a very good question, because that is one of the things that I pride myself on, especially during the pandemic, is making sure to connect with every member of the school community, as a principal and even as a central administrator. I'll give you some examples. As a building principal, one of the things that we prided ourselves on as a building was making sure that we had systems from the moment kids got out of the car in the morning until when they got on the bus in the evening. And one of the things that I loved doing was going out every morning at 6:45, opening the door for every car that came through, and making sure parents saw me, making sure kids saw me every single day. It got to the point where parents expected me to be out there, and if I had to miss a day, I got an email and said, hey, it was a mess out there because you weren't out there. And so it was those little things that and again, the pandemic really highlighted that, because we've kind of gotten away from those values of connecting with people. And so that's something that I really love doing. I love getting out there in the afternoon with stop signs holding up traffic to make sure all my buses can get out. And my bus drivers still tell me to this day, we miss you being out there, and we miss you guys being out there every single day because we did it as a team. And so those kinds of things are very important. I make a point of sharing my phone number with all of my parents or anyone that calls, and I make sure myself or my team gets back to them immediately, because that is very important in terms of making sure that everyone understands that we have their best interests at heart, and we will hear and we will listen to them. Same thing with my own team, making sure that my team understands my expectations of them, and having an open line of communication, making sure that we are meeting on a regular basis. And even with board members, although I'm not the superintendent, I still interact with them. And so making sure that if they ever have any questions or concerns, making sure that I'm available to them to answer those questions. And then finally, I am out in the community. I'm a member of several boards, not only in Port Huron, but where I live in Clinton Township. So it's very important that I'm a part of the community wherever I am, and making sure I'm visible, making sure I'm present, and making sure I'm accessible at all times.
How do we create a district-wide culture of continuous improvement, planning strategically, and aligning our actions to achieve strategic outcomes?
So a continuous model of improvement, it means that we have to really, sometimes people think of it as, we're not doing something or not doing something well. But really what it is taking a look at where we are, taking a look at the strategic plan, making sure that we have prioritized certain things so that way we can achieve a certain level of excellence, and then mapping out a plan to achieve that. And so my experience has always been making sure that we know what our children need, what the data says about our children. Data is, I've heard the saying that data is not judgmental. It just provides us some information that we need to use to help us further plan. So we need to create a plan based on the data, know where every kid is at, know how we are going to use our systems, how we're going to use our money in terms of our budget, and making sure that it is strategically aligned to what it is that we want to do. And so as we talk about having a plan, we want to talk about, again, knowing where our kids are. What does the data say about them? And then how do we then make sure that our MTSS, our systems of support, are in place to ensure that we have systems of support for our students, systems of support for our teachers, and making sure that we're communicating that to our students, make sure we're communicating that to our community, making sure that we're communicating that to parents and parents. And then one of the pieces that, that's so very important in this is that we have to make sure that we are communicating this to our students, and that way they understand what the expectations are. We need to make sure that they know that not only we care about them, we love them, we're passionate about them, but we have expectation of excellence. And they don't quite know what that means. So it's up to us to model what that means. It's up to us to show them what that means. It's up to us to plan and execute that plan. And there are going to be times where we have to take a step back from the plan and tweak the plan. But we have to stick to a plan to ensure that our kids know that we expect excellence out of them.
Thank you.
I'm going to ask a question about political awareness.
Yes.
As our superintendent, how would you advocate for political action that benefits our district and public education throughout our state?
So one of the things as a leader that I think is so very important is that that your superintendent needs to be a thought partner with the local community, local school district, parents, the community, but also a thought partner in terms of state. And so it's important that we know, as leaders, that we know exactly what our community expects, what our community wants, and we have to then take it upon ourselves to communicate that to those legislators and making sure that we are telling our story in terms of what it is that we need, what it is that we want, and ensuring that we are very driven in terms of how we get there. And so, as a leader, it's important that I learn the community, learn what's important, and then also making sure that we are communicating what's best for our students. Because what's best for the students in Oak Park may not be what's best for the students in Port Huron. And so we need to make sure that we are communicating that, and then making sure that those legislators who are fighting for us, that we're highlighting what they're doing, and that we're supporting them, and we're making sure that they are, getting the support from the district that's necessary.
Superintendents are often faced with the challenge of making decisions when there is no clear right answer and members of the community are split on the right path forward. Please talk about a time when you were faced with a difficult decision where you knew that there would be a group of people unhappy with your decision, whichever way you decided. How did you go about making that decision and getting people on board with the direction you determined was best?
So I talked a little bit about, I took on one of the toughest schools in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. About 3 months after I took on that position, it was designated a turnaround school. And what that meant was, within about a 60-day period, I had to lay off half the staff, rehire only half of them back. We had to write a comprehensive turnaround plan in the midst of trying to hire staff, run a building, and then also we had to negotiate with our bargaining units. And all of this was coming from what the staff deemed as an outsider, coming in and although it was mandated by the Commonwealth, the way they deemed it was an outsider coming in and getting rid of all of us. And so what I had to do was what was expected of me. I had to, go about the process of laying them off. I had to go about the process of posting positions, putting together an interview committee, hiring staff, putting my team together, and having them sit down and write a comprehensive turnaround plan, getting with my executive director to talk about budget, talk about our labor negotiations with our bargaining units, having to also meet with the state and get their direction, or excuse me, the Commonwealth, get their direction in terms of what we should be doing and where we should be going, the expectations. And then also meeting with the community, because it was a very involved community that really loved the building and wanted the best for that particular building. And in the meantime, there were a lot of staff who took exception to all of those actions because I was affecting, the way they deemed it, I was affecting their livelihood. I was affecting what they had, the hard work they had put into that building. And it wasn't a very popular decision. I wasn't a very popular person, but I had to do what was best because it was obviously mandated by the Commonwealth. But again, I saw the kids every day. I saw what they needed. And so the biggest thing, though, I learned from that is, I had to learn grace. Because a lot of us want grace, but sometimes we don't always want to give it. And I had to give them grace. Although they weren't very kind to me, it wasn't a very popular decision. But through that, I learned that these people are human beings. They cared about this building. They cared about their families. They had families, and this was important to them. And so we completed the task. We got the turnaround plan written. We were fully staffed by the time school started. We met with the state. We did all that was required. But I had to help heal the building. I had to help repair, how people felt. And that helped me a lot as I moved forward because I really put an emphasis once I came to Port Huron on grace. And what does grace mean? What does grace mean in an educational setting? What does it mean for our teachers? And what does it mean for our kids?
Thank you.
Yes, Jim.
Shackford,
Yes.
next 3 questions are surrounding leadership attributes. What is the most difficult decision you have had to deal with in your educational career, and how was it resolved?
So I could use this last example as one, but I also currently, in my role as a student service executive director of student services and diversity, we're often confronted with students who are students of color. And we've done some work, a lot of diversity and equity and inclusion work around this with our students students of color who are receiving disproportionate suspensions and referrals. And so we really worked hard, and as a building principal, really worked hard to cut those suspensions and creating opportunities for our kids to stay in school. But now in this particular role, I'm working with principals, and I'm looking at data from all of our buildings, and I'm having to have conversations with principals about disproportionate discipline, and sitting down with them and reviewing that data. And then most recently, a couple of weeks ago, I had to sit down with the principal. Now, she took over a building in the last couple of weeks, and I noticed a pattern in her building. And so I had to sit down with her, and I said, you know, this isn't your pattern. However, you made a decision that continues the pattern. And let's sit down and have a conversation about it. And so it was a tough conversation. One that was, you know, I had to go home and really think about how I wanted to present this to her, because I really did not want to, you know, accuse her of anything. However, this was an issue that's been going on in the district for quite a while. And so, you know, I feel like I'm an advocate. I have to be an advocate for all of our students. And so when I see a pattern like this, I have to make sure it is addressed. So we sat down, we had a real conversation about it. She understood where I was coming from. I understood where she was coming from, and we were able to come to a resolution that benefited the student. When we saw that, you know, she was able to see that there was a pattern here and that she was continuing it. I was able to see why she made the decision and why it was not a continuation of the pattern that happened before. And so we decided to, you know, call the parent in, get the student in. I got my supervisor family engagement in, and we really worked with that particular student, got him back in school, and so we all have an understanding in terms of what we're going to do moving forward when we have those kind of situations. And that's important. That's so very important when we have people who are in leadership positions who are true advocates, and that's what I feel that I am.
Thank you. How do you lead without having official authority over the people involved? Have you been in that situation before in your career? And if so, how did you handle it?
Can you repeat that for me?
Yes. How do you lead without having official authority over the people involved? Have you been in that situation before in your career? And if so, how did you handle it?
So that is sort of the situation that I'm in now. I'm in an executive director role, and I am not, you know, in charge of our building leadership. I'm not in charge. But the one thing that I pride myself on is not only am I feel like I'm a good leader, but I'm also a good follower. And it's important that as you are a leader, you demonstrate that, you know, it's not always about you. It's not always about being the top dog. It's not always being about the one who is making the decisions. Sometimes it's about empowering others. And so, and even if it's not me who is the one who's in charge, you know, I don't mind taking the back seat. There are other people. There are experts. You guys are experts of Oak Park. Okay, and so it's important that as a good leader that you understand that every decision, every time you step into a room, it's not always about who you are as a person or who you are, what your title says. It's about your actions, and that's how I like to lead, how I like to conduct myself. I can take the back seat. I can empower others. I can let others lead as well.
Okay. Last question. What are the key elements needed to establish and maintain a good working relationship between you and our board?
So board superintendent relationships are very important. So it would be extremely important if I were to be selected to be superintendent, to come in and to get to know you, allow you to get to know me. Obviously, this will be the third superintendent in about 4 years. So, and obviously there's no internal candidates. So it would take a lot of listening, a lot of learning, a lot of, just again, allowing you guys to lead and following your direction. So that way I can get to know this community, get to know what your individual goals are, what your individual aspirations are for this district. And then as I get to know you individually and get to know you collectively, we as a team set up about looking at the strategic plan, looking at how we're going to implement that, how that is being implemented, and looking at what are our short-term goals, what are our long-term goals, and making sure that we plan accordingly, and making sure that we have good communication. And I know you guys don't want surprises. I never like surprises. And so making sure that we have good communication, again, that's something that I pride myself on. I tend to over-communicate. My parents would say that to me all the time. So, oh, here goes Mr. Shackford sending another email, and that's okay. Over-communication is okay, especially as we are getting to know each other, because again, I think that builds a healthy and strong relationship that the board and the superintendent must have.
Thank you very much.
Good evening, Mr. Shackelford.
Good evening.
We're going to be answering questions about instruction and curriculum. The first question is, what experience and successes have you had with closing the achievement gap for economically disadvantaged and minority students?
So, as I talked about a little bit earlier, I have a lot of experience with turnaround schools, and unfortunately a lot of those turnaround schools are in areas where there are a lot of disadvantaged students, a lot of minority students, and so I learned a lot in terms of how to make sure that we are addressing the needs of those students, and making sure that we talked a little bit about, using data and making sure that we know what the data is and using that data to inform how we close that achievement gap. And so it's everything from just making sure that we disaggregate data based on gender. How are our boys doing? How are our girls doing? How are our black students doing? How are our white students doing? How are Hispanic students doing? How are they performing? Let's look at the trends. How have these students performed over the last 3 to 4 years? Then we need to be able to look at every single student, make sure that we then take that data and then say, well, make sure our teachers know the data, and then make sure we know what will it take. What's the magic number for that kid? What does each individual kid need to achieve a specific goal, and what specific number do we need as a building or as a district, and then we plan accordingly. And so as in terms of in the building, making sure teachers are then planning around that, and making sure that obviously we are assessing our students. So obviously you'll have the NWEA, you have different assessments, NWEA, you have your state assessments, but I also believe in short cycle assessments, those assessments that you get in midway through to make sure that you are addressing those needs. So if you see you have kids that you are, that you're working with and you know their data and you know that there's some deficiency areas, you're making sure you're teaching to that, your teachers are planning around that, and then you give a short cycle assessment, and then you look at where the kids are and you progress them that way. The whole idea is that we want to make sure that students are growing, have a growth mindset as educators, so that way they are growing from August or September until June. And we have to make sure that we are charting that, and we got to make sure that we are celebrating that. We got to make sure that as kids and as the building, we're achieving their goals, that we are highlighting that, whether it's a phone call to parents, whether it's pulling the kids in and saying, hey, you did a great job, Whether it's getting the teachers together and say, hey, we looked at your data, you guys are doing awesome. What is it that you're doing, and how can we translate that to other buildings, to other departments? And so it's about being very strategic in terms of how you approach it. And I will also say that I've had buildings where when we use this model, we've seen our data go up. We've seen, and I was in Florida, it was one of 3 buildings where we went up 1 letter grade based on, we was only 3 buildings in the district to go up a letter grade because we stuck to that plan and we made sure that we took it upon ourselves. We took it personal. That was our model that year to make sure our kids succeed.
Thank you. The next question is, what is the biggest risk you have taken to do what's right for children?
So the biggest risk that I've taken, I would have to say in my current role, actually in my current role and my previous role as principal, is making sure that certain students have a voice. And that's very important to me, being that advocate for students, and not being afraid to do what's necessary and what's needed for our kids. So I was a principal of a building where our minority population was maybe at about 20%. And so, and although it was only about 20%, especially our African American boys were being suspended at about a 40-50% clip. And so that was important. That was important that we addressed that. And so in the 4 years I was there, we did address it. But one of the things that I did in addressing it was creating a mentor group to come in and work specifically with our African American boys. That didn't go over well. And surprisingly enough, it was not well received, not only by people in the building, but I also heard rumblings in the community that it was not very well received. But it was what was important for those young men. And what we saw, and we did it for about 4 or 5 months, and the transformation that we saw in those young men in that time was just phenomenal. And so it was well worth it. Took a lot of heat for it. It was well worth it. And it's a problem. You have to do something about it. And we took it upon ourselves and gave up their time. It was important to us. And we saw that, we got interrupted with the pandemic, and we saw when those young men came back to us, they really needed us and they really missed us. And to this day, we wish that we could have continued it, but we knew we were on the right track, and we are going to continue it.
Thank you. Last question is, well, for me anyway, how would you meet the needs of college readiness while also providing high quality, relevant, career-focused opportunities for students?
So my experience of that, again, goes back to, because that was our main focus at the high school that I was at in Boston. We were actually a vocational technical high school, which made it unique because it was the only one in the city of Boston, and not uncommon in the Commonwealth, but it was very uncommon in the city of Boston. And so that's why it was very important. And so the work that we did was, we had to make sure that we were providing a good education, but also at the same time, the way the schedule was set up, once kids got to the 11th and 12th grade, they did 1 week on, 1 week off. They did 1 week of academics, 1 week of in their vocation. And so we put together a lot of partnerships. We had a lot of partnerships with a lot of local universities. We had 4 or 5 universities right around us, so we had partnerships with them. We also had partnerships with the local trade unions. So we were very focused on that. And part of one of the things that we really worked on was making sure that we were able to connect the academics to what they were doing in the vocational classes. So that way it was relevant. And so the one thing that I took away from that is we as educators have to always be forward thinking and making sure that what we are teaching kids will be relevant to them. A lot of times we sit, we teach kids the quadratic equation, formula rather, and we don't make that connection to how that's going to be used later on in life, if it ever will be used. I've never used it. But what we did there is we put the English teacher in with the auto mechanics. We put the math teacher in our tech class, and we created lessons around that. And so what that says to me and what that told me and how I answer that question is that we have to make sure that we understand what the market is asking for. And the pandemic has really kind of upended what we thought in terms of, the jobs and what the job futures will look like for our kids. And so we have to make sure that we are forward thinking. We have to make sure that we understand that, what we thought would be an industry 2-3 years ago is no longer an industry. In fact, our kids are way ahead of us in terms of understanding what they want to do and how they want to go about it. We just have to keep up.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Shackelford, we're going to talk about some finances.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Please describe your experience with budget development and financial management. What is the largest budget you have built and maintained?
So the largest budget that I built and maintained was about $10 million, and it was for, again, one particular school. And that budget was for not only for our general fund, for academics, but we also had a large Perkins fund for our career and technical education. And again, because we were a turnaround school, we also had a lot of grant funding. And so the interesting thing about that particular situation was that Boston Public Schools is funded by the city of Boston. And so it was, my first time coming into this, my first year, having to really get an understanding of it and build it around not only the turnaround plan, but making sure that we were funding our vocational programs correctly, which was a battle, because what we found was that our vocational programs in Boston were not being funded in the same way as others in the Commonwealth. And so we were really battling not only with the city but also with the Commonwealth to make sure that we got proper funding. We never quite got to where we wanted to be, but we were constantly battling and fighting to make sure that we could get that funding, because that was important, because that school was very important to that community. And so we also wanted to make sure that we had proper funding for the academic side, making sure that we were fully funded in terms of what we wanted to do for our students and what we wanted to offer for them. We made sure that we leveraged grants to help bolster what we wanted to do. So it was an eye-opening experience for my first time really building a budget that large, but we were very successful in terms of how we built the budget and maintained it.
How would you ensure we maintain a balanced budget that aligns our spending with our priorities?
So we want to make sure that when we look at our budget, we have to obviously look at our priorities and look at our budget and making sure that we are always keeping our eye on that prize and making sure that whenever we are going to implement anything new, and whenever we're considering anything, we always have to come back to that strategic plan. Is it aligned with that? If it's not aligned with that, then we probably need to move away from it, or at least have some discussion about it. If there are some things that we are absolutely passionate about, again, we need to make sure that we're open and honest and transparent about what it is we're doing and why we're doing it. Transparent not only with each other, but transparent with our staff and transparent with the community as well. But again, the number one thing is that making sure that we build something that's for our students and making sure we keep students first. If we keep students first in terms of what we're doing, we keep that strategic plan in front of us at all times, then I think we will eventually get to our goals, but we always have to keep them in front of us.
Thank you. What opportunities do you believe budget limitations present? In tough financial times, what are your top 3 priorities?
Well, top 3 priorities in terms of budgets, obviously making sure that our students are first. So in terms of any curriculum, any programming, summer programming, anything having to do with students is the number 1 priority. And so again, we need to make sure that as we are having conversations, we make sure that we keep students at the forefront. The second priority would be to make sure that our staff make sure that they are paid a competitive wage. We have to make sure that that we always stay competitive, and that we always, are looking for ways, and if that's, obviously going to our legislators to fight for more for our teachers is very important. As we know, across the country, there is a teacher shortage, and so we have to do all that we can to make sure that our teachers are compensated fairly and compensated at the level that we can compete with others. And then finally, we have to make sure that we are, very cognizant of our enrollment and making sure that we're doing what's necessary to keep our kids in Oak Park or keep our kids in the district, because with those kids comes dollars. And so we have to make sure that, that's a priority as well. And we did a great job of that when I was a building principal. We were losing kids. But we made a point of going out to the community, going out and selling and telling our story and making sure they felt comfortable. We were able to reverse that trend to where we had kids who were school of choicing out of our school. But we were able to reverse that in about 2 years, and we had to turn kids away. And that's very important. So as we're talking about budget, talking about dollars, we have to make sure that we prioritize our students and make sure our parents and our kids feel comfortable and feel safe coming to our schools, so that way they stay for year after year.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, Mr. Shackelford,
Yes. How are you?
we're going to talk about staff and personnel.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. How would you interact with other administrators in our district? How would you strike a balance between giving them the support and autonomy they need to lead effectively while holding them accountable as appropriate and necessary?
So one of the things that I pride myself on is empowering others. It's important that, my team understand my expectations. They understand what I expect of them, what I expect of myself. And then I also will then empower them. I always tell my team, you guys are the experts. You guys are the smart ones. I'm just riding your coattails. Because, you want to make sure that you're hiring good people. You want to make sure you're hiring smart people. You want to make sure you're hiring people who know and feel that they are experts, and they feel valued as experts. And when you have that, accountability kind of takes care of itself. Because if you empower someone and you make them feel that they have control, they have power to do and make decisions, and even if they make mistakes, it's not a fatal mistake, and we can talk about it, we can move on, they hold themselves accountable. They work harder than you would ever expect. Sometimes you have to dial them back and say, hey, you can, but no, they want to do a good job. That only comes when you empower them. So I'm not a micromanager. I am one that will, again, give them the room to grow, the room, some autonomy to think outside the box. And that's important to me. We don't grow as a team. We don't grow as a district if everyone feels restricted, if everyone feels like every decision that they make is going to be under a microscope. They need to feel comfortable thinking that they have a certain level of control and they can make mistakes and they can think outside the box and bring those to the table and then and have me say, okay, tell me what you need. Again, I'll step back and let you lead. You tell me how I can support you. And like I said, when you give people that power, when you make them feel that way, they will hold themselves accountable more than you ever would.
Okay. My second question is, please describe the most successful experience in building a high-performing work team.
So, again, I took that same approach. I take that same approach anytime I have a team. So I took that approach with my last team in the building. And I had assistant principal, two teachers, and my dean, who were part of my leadership team. And so, again, I empowered them to help lead our building. Our building had a lot of challenges, and so we had to, get our behavior under control. So, I put my dean in control of the PBIS, Positive Behavior Intervention and Supports. We needed some real support. We needed some real help around academics. My assistant principal was, again, an expert at curriculum. So I empowered him to take control of that. I took my two teachers, and they did my testing. They wanted to become administrators. And I tell you, in about 3 years, we were able to get that building to where we had good systems in terms of behavior, good systems in terms of academics. And I'm very proud to say that my assistant principal is now a principal, and one of the teachers is his assistant principal. My other teacher is an assistant principal at the high school, and my dean is my supervisor of family engagement. And so again, they wouldn't be in those positions if we didn't, as a team, work together. We didn't play off of each other's strengths. They filled in my weaknesses, the gaps in terms of my weakness. I did that for them as well. And so I'm very proud of how we work together. And again, that's a perfect example of when you empower people, they will work extremely hard, and they will exceed their own expectations. And that's what happened in this case.
My last question is, how would you assess and enhance the culture and climate of our district?
You have to be very intentional. And again, I have experience at that because the building that I was in, we had, we had a perception problem. And so we took it upon ourselves to make sure that we addressed that perception problem. Again, from the moment parents dropped their kids off, where the kids got off the bus, until they got on the bus in the evening or in the afternoon, and again, until we got home, we were making phone calls. And everything in between, we had systems in place for that. But then also, we took it upon ourselves that as we are telling our story, we are not going to say a negative word about this building, okay? Everything that comes out of this building, everything is going to be positive, okay? From what we put on social media to what we talk about at parent-teacher conferences, we did positive phone calls, everything. If we talked a little bit about knowing our data and giving those assessments, and when students achieved a certain score, we would call and tell parents. And one of the things about that is, we would make that phone call, and some parents would, you hear my voice and they say, uh-oh. And I say, no, I'm calling to tell you that your child did something good. And that, I'm gonna tell you, we took a month to do that. And the feedback that we got was that we had parents who were in tears because they said they had never gotten a positive phone call about their kids in their lives. And so that told me is that when you want to build a positive culture, you have to be very intentional in terms of what you do from the moment kids are in your care, and you have to be intentional about being very positive, and you have to tell your own story. You have to make sure that people understand that we are a good school district, this is why. And we're gonna constantly tell you that, we're gonna constantly show you that. And yes, there are gonna be some times where things are gonna not be so positive, but we will deal with that. But at the end of the day, we love this building, we love this district, we love these kids, and we come here every single day because we want them to have a positive school experience.
Thank you.
Now we would like to take a few minutes to provide you with an opportunity to ask any questions you might have for the board.
Thank you. I just have a couple. And I know you guys are, you give of your time here with as school board members. And so, what would be your goal, long-term goal, in terms of how you see, where you see Oak Park schools in 5, 10 years? What are your goals?
Go ahead. That was a question that's got everybody ready to answer. Go ahead.
Me personally, I would like to see Oak Park thrive. I would like to see, Oak Park thrive with students within the district, parents, engaged parents, scores, definitely our test scores meeting the match. That's what I feel.
Trustee Corcoran,
Okay,
you had your hand up, right?
I did, but I
Okay.
didn't think I was gonna get called on so soon because there were others that raised their hand before me. But, our long-term goals, of course, at this point in time, is very critical, to connect with our parents, our community, and definitely our students, and the teachers, because our grade levels right now are nothing to talk about, but yet something to do something about. And also, board communication is also a very important thing as well.
Trustee White.
So, I've said this a few times now in this process, we have a vision of cultivating visionary leaders to be engaged in a global community. And I think, to me, what that vision is about, it's about understanding the whole student. That really goes to our mission, understanding the whole student, one student at a time, right? And I think that there's a divide that exists in education that I think is fictional. There's those types of districts and there's these types of districts. And I would like to see Oak Park prove that perception that's out there is not accurate. That you can have high quality, culturally responsive, trauma-informed instruction for students that doesn't mimic what it might look like in other districts, but that addresses the needs of the students in their entirety, so that they're prepared to go out into the world with those skills. And that's something that I think we have the ability to do, in something like that hopefully we can do in the next 5 or 10 years.
Trustee Lunkins.
Okay.
So here we go.
I guess part of it too, when we have problems with not only with other schools are having it too, is the attendance. What we're gonna do about the attendance? What we're gonna do about the fighting that's going on in different schools? I mean, just because Ferndale doesn't have it or Berkeley doesn't have it, Oak Park does. And it's gotta be an issue that we have to work with day in and day out to prevent as much fighting and as much discipline that we have to take with students. It's gotta stop somewhere. Where, I don't know.
Next Did you want to go?
Did you want to say something?
Yes, please. We talk about a vision and a mission. I'm going to talk about Maxine Goodfriend's vision for children. Okay. Now that may not be what is the nice words that we have a saying for vision and mission, but in actuality, it's not touching our children the way I would hope it could. My vision and my mission is to bring our young people back to be proud of being students and having success, which I'm sure, and I feel very comfortable saying it, will do much to stop this disturbances that have been here, because everyone will be buying in. Our students and our staff will buy into one another, and the community to buy in with them. That's my vision, and that's my mission.
Thank you.
Trustee Klein.
Thank you. Kind of playing on what some of my fellow trustees have already said, my vision for this district is that the district becomes a place where parents can trust and be motivated and, the word is slipping my mind, but that their children will come here no matter where the child comes from, that child will be given the tools and presented with people who both have the professional ability to and also have the incredible desire to see that child succeed regardless of what the issues may be. And that culture infuses and plays forward and becomes kind of a virtuous cycle, as it were. I think that at the moment, I very much connect with your message of positivity, that we have to put out the positive and focus on that positive, so that the positivity will come out and cause it to be reflected back in and bring up the teachers and make the teachers feel better and bring that positivity to the students and so on, and have the students have a better pride and continue to bring up. So I don't know that my vision necessarily incorporates specific grades or sports or occupational goals, although all of those things are part of it. When you think about successful districts, all of those things definitely come in, but the idea is that when people think Oak Park, they think of that as a district that is professionally run and puts out the best product that it can.
Thank you. I would just, all my colleagues pretty much set it off. You could just bottle up all their answers and put them in one thing. That'd be great. The other thing I would add is to end the revolving door of students who live in Oak Park going to our neighboring districts. And so, that would be one thing that I would add to what we've heard here. And I think you addressed it in your comments earlier. Anything else in terms of questions for us?
Well, I just wanted to add, just as you guys were talking, one of the things that I always told my students and told my parents as well is that we need to instill in our kids a pride in the place where they learn. This is the place that will train you. If you want to be a doctor, this is where it starts. If you want to be a lawyer, this is where it starts. So we have to make sure that we instill that in that pride in them, and saying, take care of the place that you're going to learn. Take care of the place that will train you, that will get your mind ready, that will get your brains ready, that will give you the knowledge. And when you constantly instill that, that's where that positivity comes. That's where they want to be there. That's where parents feel comfortable in wanting to be there. And then just real quickly, one of my responsibilities is safety, district safety. And so it's always been important to me, because if kids don't feel and parents don't feel safe in the place that we're asking them to take pride in, then they won't take pride in and they won't learn. And so that has always been important. We have taken, we've this year, we've updated our training in terms of how, actually we transitioned from ALICE training to armed assailant response training, and so assault, I should say. And so we have trained our kids, and we've trained our staff, and so it's very important that we take security, take safety extremely seriously. Part of that is just being a presence as leaders in our building, and that extends from the superintendent to the building administrators to the teachers. We have to have that presence. We all have to be leaders. We all have to make sure that these children are, I always tell my parents, your babies are my babies when they're with me. And we have to have that same attitude every single day. So I just have one more question. What are you most proud of about Oak Park? And I'm gonna stick. I'm asking that question because again, it's that positivity. We always have to tell our story and be positive. So what are you most proud of?
Trustee Corcoran.
Well, I would say, I would be most proud to say that it's great and it's a wonderful feeling to know that we have a family community. It's great to say that our mayor of our city is very involved with her district. It is also great to know that we have a very, an awesome school district. It is really, shaky right now, but we have been soaring when it comes to the attention of our athletes. We have Nona Waldron, who is #1 hurdler in the nation. We have Miss Cook's son, I can't remember his name. He has just received a football scholarship to Princeton. We have a lot to be positive about when it comes to our teachers. We had and we are still having teachers in this community that care about these students. When you show that effort to know that you care about these students coming in, having a 30-year, term with students, that right there speaks volume. And to know that they have stuck in here even when we had a deficit. They were still here. They did not leave. They knew that they saw the end of the rainbow. And I just want to say that I'm very proud to be an Oak Park Board of Education trustee.
Thank you. Trustee Lunkey.
Mine would be our graduations. I look at the amount of students that we graduate every year, and I listen to whatever fields that those students are going into when we graduate. And to see some of them walk across that stage so happy that they finally made it, even though they might have had a hard time in high school, they made it across the stage. And that was more important to them than anything else. So for me to stand on that stage and shake their hands and find out where they're going, that means a whole lot to not only our teachers who have prepared those students to get there, or the students may have prepared themselves to get there. The community may have helped prepare them, but they're there. And to look at those students, the teachers, the parents, the community, and say, these are Oak Park students. They made it.
Trustee Hoyer.
I'm going to give two answers, so a macro answer and a micro answer. On a macro level, what I'm most proud of, and you see it reflected here at the board table, is that our entire community is bought into the school district, and that's shown in terms of the people that are sitting here. It's shown in the fact that in the last couple of years when we went out for a sinking fund, it passed overwhelmingly. That when we went out for a bond, that it passed overwhelmingly. The community is bought into this district and wants to see us succeed. And we mention all the time that we have students coming from over 100 zip codes, and that means that there are people living who are sending their students here not because it's the easiest place to send to, not because it's of proximity, but because they believe in what Oak Park has to offer. So that's one thing that I'm proud of. On a micro level, in the last 5 years or so, we've led in the state of Michigan with our Child Resilience Program, which started in Pepper School and is now expanding. It has expanded throughout the district. It is expanding statewide through the Hero Circle to provide resilience skills to our elementary school students. And those are skills that they're going to carry with them throughout their lives, no matter what they face. And that's something that's unique, that's innovative, that we're offering that I'm very proud of.
Thank you. Quickly.
Yes, very quickly. Yeah, I'm really enthused about our community. We have an engaged community, multiculturally diverse. Definitely we work well along together. I love it here. I've been in other neighborhoods, actually other states, and we meld well. Our school district, I'm proud of our teachers, I'm proud of our staff, they work hard, we're resilient. We have some, we have some ebbs and flows that, we work along with, but we get there. Unfortunately, it's been, rough around, the entire world, but, we have a really good team, and I'm proud of what we do here, our students too as well. That's some outstanding students.
Trustee Corker, you
I'm
have a
sorry,
quick
I just
correction?
have a correction. So the gentleman that received the scholarship, his name is Mr. Cross. His mom is a teacher here.
Okay.
And she had been a teacher here for years. That's
Thank you.
that correction.
Really quick.
I will be very quick. I frequently tell people that I'm mentoring or directing in any kind of way that it's not about where you are, it's about your trajectory and where you're going. And so to sum up everything that I was going to say beforehand into one little soundbite, it's that it's easy to get lost in all the processes that we're working on, but the trajectory here is solidly north.
Great soundbite. We have like 2 minutes remaining. So is there anything you want to add in those 2 minutes?
All right, I only had 2 questions, but I just wanted to say that, I think you said that things are a little bit shaken. A number of you talked about the ebbs and flows, but I will say this. I heard a lot of positivity, okay? And so there's no school district in this country that's not having shaky moments, ebbs and flows, all right? And so what I heard and what I know Oak Park to be is a district of excellence, and I see people around this table who want it to continue that way and then want to make sure it goes even, like you said, north, continue to go north. And so I want to thank you for giving me this opportunity to sit before you, interview for this position. I know this is a really tough decision. Anytime you have to select a superintendent, it's going to be a tough decision. But I appreciate your time and commitment. I just want to say thank you, and I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you. Mr. Shackelford, we appreciate your interest in the superintendent position for Oak Park Schools. The board is interviewing 7 candidates this week. We will let you know Thursday evening where you stand in our search process. Thank you for your participation in this first round interview.
Thank you, and I do also have
You can-
a
yeah,
packet with
you can
a
take-
100-day plan and letters of reference.
You're welcome to hand it to each one if you want to shake hands or whatever you want to do.
I would love to do that.
If you find that sanitary, it's your
I'm okay with that. Whatever you feel. I can do a fist bump. I can do an elbow. I can do whatever you feel comfortable.
As soon as he does that, we'll go in public.
Okay.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you for coming.
It's a pleasure. I have to say it. Duval.
There you go. There you go. You know
I was born on Naval Air Station, Jacksonville. My mother's from Jacksonville,
Okay,
yeah. So
good deal.
yeah, I know what you're doing out there. Sir. Duval.
Fine, yourself? Thank you.
Thank you. You need Dr. Hanks?
Duval.
Yes.
I said Duval County. I said, oh no, it's Duval. It's like, okay. I got family back here.
Have a good one. Thank you.
All right.
Guys, have a good night.
You too. Take care now.
We've come to, we've,
I was trying to get all that. You know that. I just need you to know that I am phenomenal.
What, with QJ?
You know I got you. We're national champions.
That's right, that's right.
I won't forget to
Okay,
mention
sis.
again. I promise I won't.
All right, sis.
we've come to the part of the meeting where the public has an opportunity to address the board with the understanding that the board members cannot respond. Trustee Smith, would you please read the public comment guidelines?
Yes, because the Oak Park Board of Education values public meetings, not just meetings in public, we welcome public comment on school issues. Speakers are asked to express themselves in a civil manner with due process for the dignity and privacy of others who may be affected by public comments. The public comment portion of the meeting cannot be used to make personal attacks against a school board member or school district employee that disrupts the order of the meeting and are totally unrelated to the manner in which the member or employee performs his or her duties. Speakers should be aware that if statements violate the rights of others under the law of defamation or invasion of privacy, such comments may result in legal liability. Most comments can be concisely stated in 3 minutes, and the board respectfully asks that comments remain focused on the topic or issue and not be directed at specific personnel or board members.
Do we have any members of the public who wish to make comments this evening?
None.
None? Going once, going twice, none at all. Okay. We're at adjournment. Trustee Smith, you want to note our next meeting?
Our next meeting is Wednesday, May 11th, here at the Administration Building at 6 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time.
Thank you. If there's nothing else, then would like to adjourn by unanimous consent. Is there any opposition to doing so? Seeing none, it's 8:27. We are adjourned.